I think it's about time we discuss the GT350R Mustang in Gran Turismo 7. This is probably one of the more notable Day 1 additions in the game's roster, and for those who were hoping for a Mustang GT350R to be in Gran Turismo, I don't think you were disappointed, or at least I would be curious to know if anyone was, because there is a lot to love here. For the price especially, and even for its point level, stock that is, it's quite a good contender. In fact, it's good enough to even compete with many European rivals, which typically you probably would not put a Mustang up against, at least around a track. Because consider what you're working with. 75,000 credits is the price. That really is not much in the Gran Turismo economy. That's a couple of sets of tyres, literally, and the point level is quite modest too. 574 is not breaking the bank. Of course, you do have to bear in mind that that is stock, so as soon as you do something like changing the tyres, you should expect that number to jump up quite drastically. But the great thing about pony cars, muscle cars, even just American cars in general, in my opinion, when it comes to powerful ones at least, and I've said this a number of times, they already have the straight line performance down to a T, so if you can improve the areas that they're not quite as good at, such as stronger brakes, maybe better gearing in the case of a classic, less body roll in the case of even this one for example, then you really do have a weapon on your hands. And with modest tuning, this could be a really good 600 point machine. With a bit more tuning, absolutely a 700 point machine for cash cow events or beyond. And it is a very, very responsive canvas to work from when it comes to a setup, much like the Camaro ZL1 1LE. Now, just like the Camaro, this of course has much more of a track slant than other versions like a Shelby GT500 for example, which you could use as a track car, but this definitely feels more in its element on a track. 525 horsepower is a really good number to be working with, and even the weight is less than 1700 kilos, which for what is by Euro standards at least quite a large car, especially for a coupe, it's pretty good. 1658 kilos is more the kind of territory of an all-aluminium Jag XKR, so for a big Mustang with a big engine and a lot of power, that's pretty good. It's very healthy, in fact. Now, the one major thing that I will say about this car in its stock form, the one thing that kind of lets it down, in fact, is that because the suspension is just still a little bit too soft for what it should be, it does have a tendency to dive quite a lot and become a bit unstable over the front end under really heavy braking. And you'll probably see a couple of examples of that here at Road Atlanta, especially at the end of the long straight, where you're coming into that 90-degree left not long before the start-finish line. You will find that the car kind of dives to the left or the right depending on your momentum and your inertia, and when that happens it can be a little bit annoying because you have to kind of recover the car mid-braking, sometimes involving backing off the brakes a little bit and slowing yourself down. But if you do, for example, lower the centre of gravity a bit with the ride height, stiffen up the dampers, stiffen up the springs, maybe a little bit more camber, a little bit more toe, and perhaps of course some better tyres, and it certainly wouldn't hurt to upgrade the brakes. With those relatively simple changes, you've gone from a really good car to a great one. Now, I'm not exactly sure what kind of point level you'd be working at with the upgrades I just mentioned, but it shouldn't be breaking the bank. And even if you were to restrict the power a little bit, say to 500 horses, to get it in a particular point category, you're still working with a lot of car. And even though I'm not going to say that this is like an American Nissan GTR or something, it's not quite that OP, but it actually could compete with more cars than you might give a Mustang credit for. Of course, here against the AI, obviously I can catch up with supercars like the McLaren 12C, etc., and that's not an entirely fair comparison when it comes to the computer-controlled vehicles, but it definitely does have the potential to be a really good choice of online racer. Now, with balance of performance, I'm not so sure, because it does seem like the kind of car that might suffer a little bit unless you can really put those finer touches onto the tuning. This is not the kind of car that just needs to drop the weight, increase the power and jump out on the track. That doesn't do the car justice. It's a car that needs to be set up really well and really, personally for you as a driver. It's a car that needs to be set up well and set up specifically for your driving style, but I will say, because it has those inherent muscle car flaws and advantages, it's so responsive to tuning. It's a really good platform to work from. Now, at least from the quick look that I had through the upgrade parts, and I haven't done a fully customised build on a GT350R just yet, so I could be wrong, it doesn't look to me like it's the most powerful thing around in terms of top-end power. You could probably get maybe 700 or so horses, perhaps close to 800 at a push, but it's not as powerful as you might think. You know, this isn't like a Viper rivaling monster of a car, at least on paper. But as a track day toy, again, like that ZL1 1LE, it is a pretty damn solid choice to go for, and if you do, like myself, enjoy representing the States when it comes to high performance, rather than a more obvious, say, Porsche, Lambo, whatever choice, then it could be a bit of a sleeper hit. It's a car which is easy to underestimate, it's a bit of an underdog compared to supercars and super sports cars, but it can definitely bring the heat with the right tuning, and even stock, it's pretty damn good already, and above all else, it's cheap. 75 grand is nothing, as I said in the game, especially for a 2016 new car to the franchise. It's a pretty affordable one. So it's even feasibly a car that you could buy fairly early on in your career if you wanted to. So ultimately, that's it for my thoughts on the GT350R Mustang. A very good car, and that's coming from someone who isn't even the biggest Mustang fan. So of course, drop your thoughts down below. If you love the car, maybe you haven't used it as much, maybe you find it to be a sleeper hit for a certain point level, online, or even in career mode, of course drop that down below, and of course stick around for more on the channel. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.